Now, The Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Tuesday. Hope your work week's off to a good start. Thanks for hanging out with us here on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Our two Tuesday regulars will be along, although Sharief's going to be shuffled around a little bit. We'll talk to Sharief in 15 minutes about the New Orleans Saints as things are moving very, very quickly down there on Airline Drive. Saints looking for a new head coach, and that search began over the weekend and will now continue until they figure that out. We'll talk to Sharief about it in 15 minutes. Glen West, go 24/7 with us in 30 minutes, talking LSU and Missouri hoops, as well as some transfer portal. I want to talk a little bit about the basketball tonight in the Southeastern Conference. We'll do some of that. In hour two, Drew King, PowerMizzou.com, covers the Missouri Tigers for 24/7 Sports. He'll join us to give us the Missouri scouting report on things for tonight's game. 8 o'clock tip from up in Como. I have decided on my pick for the New Orleans Saints' next head coach. I will tell you who that is at 2:15. Plus, 6 Tigers headed to the Senior Bowl. We'll tell you who and what they've got at stake at the end of this month. So plenty to get to on this Tuesday. Lock us in over the next couple of hours. Got Jacob Beck and Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos. Let's get things cranked up with our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
LSU and Missouri tonight from Como. It's real cold up there. The high today is like 20. The low is like 0. It's real chilly up there in Columbia, Missouri. But I still think that they'll get a pretty decent crowd up there for this one. They're a pair of 0-1 SEC teams. LSU, the only home team to lose in the SEC on Saturday, as Vanderbilt came in here and won. And Missouri went to Auburn and got blasted by an Auburn team that was throwing in threes from everywhere. I watched the highlights of that game on Sunday, kind of understanding that I would be preparing for this game on Tuesday. And it was just like, goodness gracious, Auburn can shoot. And they were just putting it on Missouri early and often in that game. But it's a Missouri team that's in a bounce-back year under their head coach, Dennis Gates. As y'all probably remember, Dennis Gates took that program over the same year Matt McMahon did, and in year one, he had a great season, 25-10, 11-7 in Southeastern Conference play. They went to the second round of the NCAA tournament, and USA Today actually named Dennis Gates their SEC Coach of the Year. And then came the next year, which was last year, and they went 0-18 in the league. So he brought his Cleveland State team basically over to Missouri with a couple of other transfers, and they had a good year. Everybody left, and they didn't restock the shelves. They were terrible last year, and that was evidenced by their 0-18 start. But they've bounced back this year. They're 11-3, 0-1 in league play, as I mentioned. They lost in the season opener at Memphis, who's a good team. Lost that game by 8. They beat Cal in a shootout, 98-93. Their big win of the season came against number 1 Kansas when they beat the Jayhawks in Columbia, 76-67. Kansas was the number 1 team at that point. They've also lost to Creighton in West Virginia this year, so Bill Self's team, very talented, just figuring some things out early in the year. And in St. Louis, Missouri played a good Illinois team and lost 80-77. So again, 11-3, 0-1 in league play. This is a game where LSU, I believe, has a puncher's chance. When LSU plays Alabama, when LSU plays Auburn, when LSU plays Tennessee, as y'all know, at this point, I'm in no position to even think LSU is going to stay in those games. They may, and I'll be wrong, and I'll come here and tell you that I was incorrect, but that's the way I feel about some of the games at the top of this league. This is not one of those. Missouri has a solid team. Vanderbilt has a solid team. LSU has a solid team. And while I believe Missouri to be a better team than LSU, and I believe this game to be on the road, which is why LSU is a 7.5 point favorite, depending on where you look. Missouri is a 7.5 point favorite, depending on where you look. I think LSU can play in this game if they play a really good basketball game. Missouri has a couple of real MOs that are going to be keys in this game, and they kind of jump off the page statistically. Missouri leads the nation in free throws made per game. They make 21 free throws per game. That suggests a team that attacks and attacks and attacks and attacks. And what else actually lends itself to suggesting that this team attacks and attacks and attacks? Well, they're number 286 in the country in assists per possession. So they're driving to draw contact. They're driving to score at the rim. They're 178th in the country in the percentage of the points they get from three-point range. They don't shoot a lot of threes. In three-point attempts, they're 250th. In shooting percentage, they're 10th in the country, okay? So if you're 10th in the country in shooting percentage, you're not chucking it from the cheap seats. So all of these statistics line up perfectly. This is a team in Missouri that wants to get downhill and go to the bucket. LSU's backcourt was constituted by Matt McMahon for this season to be better on the ball defensively. You brought in Jai Bailey, who doesn't really threaten anybody offensively, especially from the three-point line. He's not a huge assist guy. He's a defensive player. Cam Carter went to an Elite Eight as a starter at Kansas State on a team that prided itself on defense. Jordan Sears, loads of steals last year, playing at a tick lower level at Tennessee Martin. But these guys were brought in to play defense. And LSU's defense has been really good on the first shot this year. Y'all have heard me say this time and time and time again. LSU is in the top 25 in the country in defensive efficiency. They're not in the top 25 in the country in points allowed per game because, one, they play a lot of possessions, and two, because they can't rebound. Now, Missouri's a good offensive rebounding team. They're 66th in the country. And keep in mind, 66th in the country in football is not that great. 66th in the country in basketball, when you talk about 350-plus teams, is high end. But LSU, more so than the offensive rebound in this game, is going to have to keep Missouri from driving the lane consistently. If Missouri does that and gets where they're trying to get on the floor, they're going to hurt LSU badly because LSU doesn't protect the rim especially well. They're okay at it. They're better than they were last year, but not especially well, and they haven't proven they can do it against the high-level teams. They can protect the rim against Stetson. Can they protect the rim against Vanderbilt? Can they protect the rim against Missouri, Pittsburgh? That remains to be seen. Now, you look personnel-wise at this Missouri team, and there are a couple of guys to worry about. Mark Mitchell is their leading scorer. He's a 6'9 junior, and he's listed as a guard/forward. He's kind of a wing, but he doesn't shoot threes. He lives at the free throw line, as you might imagine. He gets there 7 to 8 times per game. Doesn't shoot it great from there. He's only 60%, but he's an attacker and a guy that's going to get physical and get up around the rim. And he's a guy that you're going to have to deal with and you're going to have to stop. Tamar Bates is a senior guard for them, scores 12.5 a game. He gets to the free throw line a lot, and he's 37 for 39 from the free throw line. He makes them all. Not a great three-point shooter, just 33%, but he makes all of his free throws. And then you've got the dead-eye shooter that you got to be worried about when these guys are putting it on the deck because they're not a big assist team, but at times, Caleb Grill has gone off. And when you make 8 threes against Eastern Washington and 7 threes against Pacific, and you're shooting nearly 50% for the year, that's a guy that you've got to concern yourself with. And that's all he does is just sit there and shoot threes while the other guys drive. So Mark Mitchell is guy number 1 you got to deal with. Tamar Bates, number 2, and then you got to deal with the shooter in Caleb Grill. The fourth guy that I want to mention, and I'm not going to go through Missouri's entire roster, those are the main scores. There's one more guy that's familiar to folks here in Baton Rouge if you've been paying attention the last 4 years. Josh Gray plays for Missouri. He was on Will Wade's last team. He went to South Carolina, played there for 3 years. He's got 1 year left. He's at Missouri. He plays about 15 minutes for him, and all he does is rebound and put in shots around the bucket. Josh Gray for the season is shooting 68%. So not doing a lot of shooting from around the arc and from 15 feet. He's doing all his work around the bucket. He is 7 feet tall and 265 pounds. LSU doesn't have anybody outside of Noah Boyd, who doesn't play and isn't going to play a lot tonight, I'm sure, that can match him physically, and that's a big problem. So for LSU, this is, and look, going into the Vanderbilt game, I gave you the keys. I said they got to take care of the basketball and they got to rebound. Well, they didn't take care of the basketball and they didn't rebound. They shot it fine. They defended on the first shot fine, They didn't do the rest of the stuff. And in this game, they've got to cut Missouri off on the drive. Easier said than done because it's going to be relentless. But that's what these guys are here for. And then you've got to get on the glass. LSU should be okay in terms of creating offense. Missouri's a good defensive team. They're not phenomenal. They do steal the ball a good bit. They're 14th in the country in turnovers forced per game. So what does this boil down to? You're asking Jordan Sears and Cam Carter to play fast. That's what Matt McMahon wants to do. And LSU does play fast. They play really fast. They're in the top 30 in the country in possessions per game. But you can't just go fast for the sake of going fast. Because if you're just going fast for the sake of going fast, you're going to make stupid mistakes like they made against Vanderbilt. And keep that, they were stupid mistakes. Some of those turnovers were completely ill-forced by Vanderbilt. They just weren't. You were trying to go too fast and push it too much. I mean, you're flying down the floor trying to do spin moves in crowds of 3 people. You're going to turn that over 70% of the time. And they did. Push it when it's there, don't when it's not. Jordan Sears and Cam Carter have played a truckload of collegiate basketball games. There's no reason for them to get sped up beyond where they're comfortable. I'm all for LSU trying to push the pace because in the half court, you don't have a lot of front court scoring, so you let teams set their defense and it's tougher to operate. So I get trying to go fast, but you can't just give the ball away 15, 16, 17 times. You've got to be able to create some shots in the half court when things slow down a little bit. So don't turn it over, cut them off on the drives, and try to rebound. Missouri's got a magic number here, and it's 80. When Missouri gets to 80, they're 9-0. When they don't, they're 2-3. When their opponents get to 80, did that backwards. When their opponents score 80, I wrote the note wrong, and now I can't read it. But there's a magic number of 80. I looked at it and went, nope, neither one of those are written down right. It's in Missouri's game notes. I know where I got it from. But either way, when they get over 80, they win almost every time. When their opponent gets over 80, they win almost every time. I believe when their opponents get over 80, they're 1-3. That's what I think. Yeah, when they hold their opponents under 80, they're 10-0. When their opponents get to 80, they're 1-3. There's your note. So 80 is the magic number. I don't think LSU is going to get to 80 tonight. That would surprise me if they got to 80. If they get to 80, LSU is going to make 13 threes. And I just don't see that happening because LSU is not shooting that many threes. Carter and Sears are really the only guys that put threes up on Saturday. So this is a game that I will pick Missouri to win. It's a game I think LSU can win, but they're going to have to do some things that they haven't done against the best teams that they've played. I believe that Matt McMahon will have this team playing better basketball down the road than they did in November than they are early in January. Jalen Reed's injury is a big, big deal. And we're not going to talk about that a lot because there's nothing you can do about it. But this is one of the games you can get. And if they can get this game, they'll be back on track. You get this game, you're back on track. You lose this game, you feel like going to Ole Miss is going to be really difficult. Now all of a sudden you're 0-3 and you're pretty desperate next Tuesday when Arkansas and John Calipari come to Baton Rouge. You win this game, you go to Oxford, see what you can do, and then you still got a chance to come home and play Arkansas. You don't feel like you're desperate at that point. But you got to start getting a couple of these because y'all are well aware this gets really hairy really quickly. Because I'll give you the stretch that's coming up, and I feel like y'all already know this, but again, I'm here to talk about the team, so we'll talk about it. But after Arkansas, you are at Texas A&M, who's ranked 10th. You're at Alabama, who's ranked 5th. You play Auburn at home, who's ranked 2nd. And then you've got Texas and Georgia. Georgia's on the road. Those teams aren't great. But there's a 4-game stretch in there that's going to be brutal. And you've got to find a way to get a game or two here early. You can't go 0-7 and think you're going to respond to that. You're just not. So we'll see if LSU can go tonight. SEC Network, 8 o'clock. We've still got plenty more to discuss when it comes to this game. We're going to talk to Glen West briefly about it coming up. And then Drew King, who's with PowerMizzou.com, is going to join us at 2 o'clock to talk about all of it. That's our Genesis opening drive here on this Tuesday. When we come back, Sharief, Ishaq talking Saints coaching search next.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
chugging right along here on a Tuesday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Glen West coming along here in about 15 minutes talking Tigers. Sharief, Ishaq usually at the bottom of hour number 2, but plug him in right here at 1:15 here on this Tuesday. Joined us on the Jim's Firearms Hotline. Sharief, the Saints season is over. How are we doing?
Fantastic. It feels great. I'm finally happy that dreaded 5-12 nasty season's over with and never have to deal with it again.
It was not good, but it is going to bring about some change. My question is a hypothetical here, but I want you to give me your thoughts on this. Do you believe that this season and the last 4 seasons have created an urgency in the front office to do things differently, or they feel like their process is pretty good, they've just got to get the right guy?
I think I hate to say this, I think I'm going to go with the latter. Okay. And I know that's not what I want to hear, because they're so comfortable with what's easy to them. And what's easy is being comfortable, if that makes sense to you. And that's why you keep seeing names like Aaron Glen pop up and him being maybe the front runner for the head coaching job. It's because they're comfortable with Glen since he was in the building from 16 to 20 as a secondary coach. So I, in my opinion, think that's the lazy, easy way out. I think that they should become comfortable at being uncomfortable and doing something different like they did after the Hurricane Katrina season and hire Sean Payton. I think they need someone who is an offensive-minded head coach. That's where the game is today. It's an offensive, it's an offensive game. I think they should do that. And would I be upset if they hired Aaron Glen? No. I think he's a brilliant, head coach probably in years to come. I think he has a chance to be a good head coach. Look what he's done this year with a beat-up Lions squad that's been almost decimated by injuries. So they can relate there if he's a Saints head coach and dealing with injuries. But I think they need to start thinking outside of that building and that Sean Payton tree and just, gut it inside out and just start over.
Let me drill down deeper on your thoughts on the organization. So if they want to keep doing things the way they've done them, then that would indicate that they don't think that anything is necessarily wrong, which they haven't been good in 4 years since Drew Brees left. And I guess they would have to be pinning this on injuries. The reason things haven't gone well is because they've gotten hurt. Is that what you think they believe at the highest level of the organization?
Yes, absolutely. It's one of the things that Mickey Loomis continues to say after every season that's come to an end the last 4 years. We're there. We're close if we were healthy. Look, man, I think this might be the first year where the players are starting to say we can't use injuries as an excuse. I mean, they're right. This is finally the year that the players have actually said, we can't use injuries as an excuse, even though, hey, yeah, we suffered some historical injuries, but we still can't use that as an excuse. I mean, at some point in time, 4 years of saying the same thing, it's almost sounded just like the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same exact result. It's got to change. Legit, it has to change. I just can't imagine, Gail, Dennis Lauscha, and Mickey Loomis thinking this is fine. It isn't fine. I mean, don't tell your fan base that we're close if. Those aren't ifs and we're close aren't getting you wins. They're putting you in a worse spot right now. And I think it's, I think a lot of people will agree with this sentiment. It's time to move on. It's time to kind of, do a little rebuild, maybe gut it a little bit. I mean, James Hurst even agrees with that. It's time to gut it because it ain't working and you're getting too old on that roster.
No question about that part. They are getting far, far too old, and the only way to fix that is with the draft. So let's talk about some of the candidates that have popped up with names of folks that are supposedly being contacted and requested for interview. You got Aaron Glen, you got Joe Brady, you got Mike Vrabel. What is your reaction to some of these names that are trickling out, and have any surprised you?
No, none of them have surprised me. Not at all. I mean, but I'll be honest with you, Mike Vrabel was going to take the Patriots job, so they can just go scratch that one off, all right? Either Patriots or Bears, and he's not coming here. And I also don't like to hear the words people don't want to come here. While I have criticized, the front office and some of the decisions that have been made, I still think they have a good owner. I still think the Saints have a good owner, but it's probably the roster that's scaring a lot of people away. We can go into detail about how I think that, people shouldn't be scared to come take this job because look what Dan Campbell did in Detroit. And that was a far worse situation than what the Saints are dealing with. I mean, he took over a disaster, and look where they're at now. So that's my opinion on the Saints situation. So I mean, look, I told you I want an offensive-minded head coach if it were me. I mean, Joe Brady's 35. I mean, little skins on the wall. I mean, he's done a good job, but how will he be? Can he command the room? Can he be a leader? Can he do that, when Josh Allen isn't your quarterback? That becomes the question. So that's where Aaron Glenn comes to the top of the mind, because he's had to deal with the injuries. He's, had to build from bottom up with Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson, who, by the way, would be my top choice as the head coach for the Saints, is Ben Johnson. But at least he's been there, seen it, and done it. How would he do here? Can he build a staff? Are they going to force him to keep the offensive staff? Is also the question. But no, I'm not surprised. I am not surprised that, who's on that list.
Darren Rizzi is on that list. Your thoughts there?
The players love him, man. The players do love him and respect him a lot. They really spoke highly of him since he took over for Dennis Allen, and he even said it again yesterday. I mean, Alvin Kamara vouched for him that he would like to see him as the next head coach, but understands the decision isn't on the players. And a very passionate guy. I mean, a Jersey guy, so he's passionate. Loved the team, loved the city, and he got emotional after the game Sunday. About this job and the players and the organization. I just think it's a long shot. He's gonna have a shot, but I believe it's a long shot.
What is the future of Derek Carr?
He said he's not taking a pay cut yesterday. And look, it's not his fault that he's not going to take a pay cut. They're the ones who gave him the money. So if Sharief and Hunt were making $40 million a year, they said, "We need to take a pay cut." I'm not taking a pay cut. Sorry, you gave me that money. Now he's willing to restructure, but he's not taking a pay cut. I don't know, man. I mean, it's going to be a rebuild. I mean, it's going to be a situation where they're probably at 4 or 5, 6 wins next year. So maybe they just cut them loose and try to save the money post June 1st cut, and try to save them $28, $29, $30 million. So I wouldn't be surprised if they cut them loose. I mean, it's just not fit.
Another unanswerable question, but I think an interesting conversation nonetheless. What do you think the conversation is like between the candidates who are interviewing with the Saints executives and their discussions about Derek Carr? Do you think the next coach gets to make that call? Do you think they're kind of telling what they think in terms of the salary cap? How do you think that conversation goes?
The conversation has to be like, "Hey, listen, Mickey, do I have to keep him? Are you tied to him?" We have a ex-head coach has a player in mind that they would like to bring in. We would like to know if you'd let us make the decision on our quarterback and our staff. I just don't see, Derek fitting on our team if I'm the head coach. And Mickey can fire back with, "Well, we owe him this much money. We have to keep him at least 1 year." And maybe they say, "Fine, we'll do it for 1 year," and they'll just see what happens next year. But I'd assume that coach is going to want the decision on who his quarterback is, because it's Dennis' quarterback. It's not the new coach's quarterback. They may not want that quarterback. Look what Dan did when he went to Detroit. He traded Matthew Stafford and got Jared Goff. He wanted that quarterback, and they got picks in return. They're not getting that. Let's be honest. They are not getting any first-round picks and a Jared Goff in a trade. So I think the new head coach is going to probably say, I don't, necessarily need to have Derek Carr as my quarterback, and we can just go ahead and start working for the future.
It's definitely an interesting time down there in New Orleans, and it'll certainly materialize as the week progresses. I can't get you out of here without a thought on Zion returning to the lineup here for the first time in quite a few weeks, as the Pels are in last. Let's just be clear. What does that mean for New Orleans?
It means, a boost, a much-needed boost that they need in the paint, and someone who could facilitate and drive to the rim, because they've had issues getting consistent drives to the basket. And you get a guy like that back in the lineup. Look, he hasn't played since November 6th. We're talking about 2 months. Yep. And they've gone 4-23 since he's been gone with that hamstring injury. So, yeah, you can't. What more? You get a lot with Zion back. There's nothing that you don't get back with him in the lineup. But I think that, the ability to get to the basket is the number one thing. You need to have that guy who can actually, get to the rim, because that's where they've struggled this year, not having that guy who can get you the fouls and get you those easy layups and dunks. So it's just unfortunate that I don't think Trey's going to be playing. He's day-to-day with that ankle injury, and maybe he plays tomorrow. He hasn't practiced concerning his ankle against the Wizards the other night, but now you have Zion back in, and maybe one day the entire team will be healthy. But it's going to be too late. Obviously, the season's already done. I'm just worried about it getting out of hand to where they lose the top 3 or 4 pick at this point.
We'll see. Sharief, we appreciate the time. We'll talk next week and see if the Saints are closer to finding a coach.
All right, but it's going to be a long process. I think it's going to be quite a few weeks before they find a head coach.
I would agree with that. We'll catch up with you down the road. Thanks, man.
All right, Hon.
Sharief, Ishaq, WDSU down in New Orleans. I think it is. I agree with him. I think it is going to be a long process. I think it's going to take some time. I think there are absolutely coaches that they would love to interview and would love to have come to New Orleans or meet in person that have playoff games to prepare for. So I don't think you have a coach that's imminently going to be hired, and so we'll have a lot to talk about over the next couple of weeks. When we come back, we'll shift back to LSU, talk some hoops and some football with Glen West next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com. These vehicles are incredibly safe. I just want to get this lead with that because I think it's so important these days when people are shopping for a vehicle. What's the safety qualifications? And when you talk about Genesis, you're talking about a line of vehicles that across the board have the same safety features. And all of them were on the IIHA top safety picks list. Some of them were top safety picks plus. They are among the safest vehicles on the road. Not to mention, they're stylish and sleek and comfortable and drive wonderfully well, and they come at a reasonable price. It's a luxury brand of vehicle at a reasonable price. They're on Airline near Pico, just across from Women's Hospital. It's Genesis of Baton Rouge. Every car that is on the lot is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. So you can browse at the tip of a finger, kind of look through what you're looking for. You can head to the dealership, or they can bring that car to you for a test drive off-site. They can come to the office. They can come to the home. It's just part of being a shopper and a customer and a driver of Genesis over at Genesis at Baton Rouge. Their airline at Pico near Women's Hospital. Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
On Palmer Show on a Tuesday, Tigers headed up to Columbia, Missouri. Play some hoops tonight at 8 o'clock. Got off to a tough start in league play with a loss to Vanderbilt back on Saturday. Glen West, Go 24/7 was there. Joins us on every Tuesday at 1:30. Joins us now on the Jim's Farms hotline. Glen, how are we doing?
Doing all right, hon. How about yourself? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Doing all right. Not a good start for LSU in league play. Surprised at what you saw on Saturday?
No, I wouldn't say surprised. I would say, it was probably just a good opportunity to see what this team might look like against a in-conference opponent. I think my takeaway is probably not going to be very different from yours or a lot of people that maybe watched that game. First, 20 minutes or so, especially in that first half, LSU just looked really out-physical in a lot of different ways. And I thought that was pretty alarming to come out. And I mean, we talked with Cam Carter after the game, and he said, it was a welcome to the SEC moment for all of us. And, to hear that from a guy who's played a lot of big basketball in his career at Kansas State, has played a lot of these tough opponents. That was a little bit of concern to hear. But, I think they were able to pick themselves up in the second half and do some things to get themselves back in the game, even take a lead. But Vanderbilt got back to what it was doing well in the first half and was able to put LSU away in the final minutes there. So I think it's I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm concerned about this group, in the long term for this SEC slate and just how they're going to be able to hold up physically against these teams, because it's only going to get harder from here. Just watching around the league and just how tough these games have been especially from those top tier teams that you still have on your schedule.
You can't predict injury, obviously, but back in July, I would have told you that an LSU team would lean pretty heavily on Jalen Reed, Tyrell Ward, and Mike Williams, who played well as a freshman last year, and they don't get any minutes from any of them because Jalen Reed is hurt, Tyrell Ward's not with the team, and Mike Williams doesn't play. So how big a deal is that, and how surprising, now that we have hindsight's 2020, but like how surprising is that, and how big a deal is that?
I think it's a huge deal. I mean, I'm on these message boards on our 24/7 site, and I'm sure you're on some of them too. But we have some fans out there that are saying it's no excuses this time for Matt McMahon and this program. But I mean, Tyrell Ward was supposed to be coming back as a third-year guy who's had a lot of SEC experience. Jalen Reed in that same boat, and like you mentioned, Mike Williams, I thought was one of your best shooters last year from the outside, and just can't seem to get on the floor. So losing Reed with the injury, Ward before the season. I mean, literally a week before the season. Might have even been like that night when they had opening tip. We learned about 10, 15 minutes beforehand that he wasn't going to be with the team. That just throws a monkey wrench into everything, because those are guys that have played in this kind of schedule before and that were going to be really needed to be leaned on at this time of the year. So you could get away with it in non-conference play, and I thought LSU did for the most part. They were able to skate through that non-conference play without much of a hitch, but I thought you saw it in game one against Vanderbilt, against a team in Vanderbilt that's not the tallest, the biggest, the longest, the strongest. They were able to kind of handle LSU in a lot of different ways in that game.
In fact, the shortest and the least long of anybody in the SEC, and they still grab 17 offensive rebounds, which is really, really tough. So you look at tonight, Missouri team that's 11-3, that's going to be on its home floor for the first time in league play. LSU handled itself very well at Kansas State in a true road game. They're going to have to do a little bit more than they did that night to win this one in Columbia. You got a key or two to this one for LSU tonight?
Yeah, I think for me, they've got to find something offensively. I mean, they just lean so heavily on Cam Carter and Jordan Sears, and those two guys, I think, can only carry you but so far. I think they're really good SEC players from an offensive perspective, but you've got to find something from somebody else. And so for me, when you look at it, they're not going to be a very good perimeter shooting team, I don't think, this year outside of those two guys. So you've got to be able to take it to the basket. You've got to be able to draw contact and get to the free throw line. I think that, to me, is the path towards success for this group, is being able to have relentless pressure on the rim offensively, and then just trying to be able to hold up defensively on the other side at the rim as well and grab some rebounds. I mean, sure, the turnovers are going to be a problem all season long. The rebounding is going to be a problem all season long. But what I think LSU can control offensively is getting to the rim. I think they have players that can do that between Carter, Sears, Jai Bailey can certainly do that. I'd love to see Curtis Givens, get a little bit more confidence in his offensive game and start taking it to the rim more. So I think it's going to have to be a team effort here for LSU to go in and get a win at Missouri. This is a Missouri team that's, I think similar to LSU in some ways, but they're also longer and they're a little bit, bigger in some respects too. So LSU's got to be able to handle themselves on the glass tonight and make sure that they're putting pressure on the rim offensively, I think, is the path towards success for this team.
Victorious Miller really had a rough go on Saturday. Yeah. 3 turnovers, only shot at once, and it was a rushed 3. And the turnovers were not very pretty. That had been uncharacteristic for him throughout the month of December. He had played pretty well and scored it pretty well. Do you expect a bounce back from him over the next couple games?
I sure hope so. I mean, one of my biggest points coming in, I wrote a big piece kind of going into the SEC play, was how are these freshmen going to be able to adjust, and how quickly is that learning curve going to kind of set in for them? And it looked like it was a little bit of fast speed for Victorious in that first game. So he's one of those guys that you've got to be able to rely on from an offensive perspective, particularly off the bench. I can't remember how many points LSU had off the bench in that Vanderbilt game, but 4. I don't think it was many. So they've got to get more of a scoring punch there, and that's the guy that you've got to really lean on. So hopefully he can learn from that first game. Hopefully they can get something more from Givens. I'd love to see Robert Miller continue to get big minutes. I think long-term his future is very bright, and I think that he has some untapped potential there offensively to continue growing into this year. So we'll see. I think these freshmen have got to learn quickly, though. They've got to pick things up and really be a bright spot for this team, because they need them. They need everybody on all hands on deck to kind of get through this schedule.
Do they win tonight?
I don't know that you can go into any game here going forward and saying that they're going to win. I think this is as beatable of a team as they're going to face over the next 5-6 weeks. I mean, they have got to get this win. I will put it that way. They have to win this game to kind of give themselves some momentum that they can feel like they can compete in this conference. And to do that on the road, I think would be a pretty good accomplishment here in the first week or so of conference play. So I won't guarantee a win or anything, but I'll say that you hate to say do or die at this point in the schedule, but it feels of that magnitude here in this first week.
It's a big one for sure. There's no question about that. Let's transition to football briefly here as I got you for a couple more minutes. Transfer portal, looks like they're looking for defensive backs. Got a couple that may be headed this way this week, a tight end as well. What do you expect to see over the next couple of weeks as far as portal additions? Maybe not names, but as far as positions go.
Yeah, I think safety is still an option out there for LSU. I think I wouldn't be a bit surprised if there's still a couple guys that LSU's waiting on that's still playing in the college football playoff that maybe they go after whenever they're knocked out or whenever they win. So I would certainly keep an eye on that. But I don't think it hurts to bring in guys and just see kind of where their heads are at and kind of where LSU could potentially see them fitting in. I do think that we're kind of getting to the point here in the portal where you have to be a little bit more selective. I mean, LSU's been going ham in the portal for over a month, and now you've got those 13, 14 guys committed. You only have so many more spots that you can fill, so you have to be very selective. You kind of have to balance that. Do we want to fill that position now, or do we want to be a little bit more conservative and risky and wait for maybe one or two guys that we're thinking are going to hit the portal that we can really capitalize on? So a starting safety, I think, would be the home run hit here over the next week or so. Certainly you could add some tight end depth to kind of help bolster that room, but I think that's more of a want than a need at this point. I do think you can get by with Bauer, Sharp, and Trey'Dez Green if they stay healthy. So potentially another offensive lineman could help, but they're also got a 3 deep at offensive line, just crunching the numbers there. So I think outside of safety, everything else is more of a bolster their unit kind of thing than actual need. And so I do think that's kind of where we're kind of at right now with the portal and LSU.
Looking for portal additions, coverage on recruiting, looking for basketball, baseball, football, Glen West, Sunny Ship, the whole gang over there at Go 24/7's got you covered. Glen's with us each and every Tuesday. Glen, thanks so much for the time.
All right, Hunt. See you on the Twitter board tonight.
I'll be there all over the place. All right, we'll take a time out. We'll come back and preview some big-time hoops in SEC play tonight. We'll preview LSU-Missouri from the Missouri side of things in 15 minutes. You're listening to Tuesday edition of The Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Video Security Solutions, avssla.com is the website. Check them out on Instagram. avss_BR is the Instagram handle. Some great pictures and some videos of the great capabilities that they've got, whether it's whole home audio, television installation, video surveillance, all these things they can handle at Audio Video Security Solution. I talked to you about some fairly straightforward things like surround sound, television mounting, burglar alarms, and security systems. All those pretty straightforward. They can do some incredibly high-tech stuff at Audio Video Security Solutions as well. Voice automation is one of those. You want to walk into the living room or the man cave or whatever room it is and say, watch a movie or watch the game, and have the lights dim and the curtains come down and the television come on and the speakers perk up. Like, they can do voice automation at Audio Video Security Solutions. They can make anything really, really easy for you, as they've done in the Palmer House over the last year. Mitchell Fisher is fantastic to work with. It's his company. They're local here in Baton Rouge, and the customer service that we've experienced after the installation has just been first class. It's 225-439-7920. That's not the number to some operator somewhere in Atlanta. That's Mitchell's cell phone number right here in Baton Rouge, 225-439-7920. They are happy to help you out with whatever it is with your electronics at home. It's Audio Video Security Solutions. Find them online at avssla.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Five games in Southeastern Conference basketball tonight. The 6 o'clock window has got 2 of them. The first is a top 10 matchup down in Gainesville, Florida at the O-Dome. Tennessee is at Florida. I'm looking at the ESPN score bug for that game, and 2 things are standing out to me. One, number 1 Tennessee is an underdog tonight, 3.5 points at Florida. Number 2, it is listed as the Stephen C. O'Connell Center and not Exact Tech Arena. at Stevens C.O. O'Connell Center. So I don't know if Exact Tech bailed or not. I was never going to give them the time of day either.
Dang, man, not Exact Tech.
It was going to be the O-Dome anyway. Like the Tommy Bowl, Thompson Bowling Arena is like City Foods Arena.
Yeah.
There is no shot I am calling it City Foods Arena. That is the Tommy Bowl for now and forever, and that's just what it's going to be. But Tennessee and Florida are going to play tonight in the O-Dome, and that's going to be incredible basketball. Tennessee is really good on both sides of the floor. I think Zakai Ziegler is as good a point guard as there is in the SEC. I don't know what his pro prospects are, but he's been in Knoxville for like 10 years, and he just makes all the winning plays. I could watch that dude play whenever. He hustles, he plays hard, he knocks down threes, he finds open men, he defends. He talks a little bit, but that's okay because he backs it up. And I love watching him play. Florida is just big and physical. I was watching them in that game against Kentucky, and they were going at Kentucky for everything Kentucky was worth. Now, Kentucky had the kid come off the bench and was just raining in threes, but like Clayton had 33 points in the game. He's really, really good. Chinneyu is really, really good as well. Elijah Martin had 26 points in that game. Like they're just big and physical. You watch Florida come out of the tunnel and you realize just how imposing they are. And it's kind of unfortunately the opposite of the way I feel when LSU takes the floor. Like Cam Carter's a really good player. He's kind of skinny. And Jordan Sears is a heck of a player. He's 5'10". And LSU's just not very physically imposing. Damian Collins is like you're big at 6'9", 6'10". He's really skinny. Florida looks like a football team when they come off of the bus. Kentucky will go to Georgia. I would expect Kentucky to handle business in that game. However, the number on it's just 2.5. So that is interesting to me. Mike White's kind of on his last legs here. Not saying that he's about to get fired because Georgia's 12-2 and they could well have a really good year this year and Mike White would be just fine. But like he had his chance at Florida and he had a really good start and then they kind of were mediocre for a while and he jumped and went to Georgia and now you've got your chance at Georgia. And if it doesn't go well at Georgia for Mike White, then like that's kind of it for your chances in the big time. He's an Ole Miss grad, a New Orleans native, and wants to be in the Southeast. But if you want to coach at one of the big time schools, you got to make it stick. And Georgia's a tough job, but we'll see. They're just a 2.5-point dog at home against Kentucky. Auburn, who is a monster, is at Texas in this game. I don't know that Texas is great. That game is at the Moody Center. Auburn is a 10.5-point favorite in this game. Auburn just shoots you just to death. They're so good on offense. They're number one in the nation in offensive efficiency. I told y'all earlier when I was previewing LSU and Missouri, Auburn and Missouri played at Auburn on Saturday, and I watched the highlights of that game on Sunday, kind of get ready for LSU and Missouri, and I was just so taken aback by Auburn's ability to score. And their only loss this year is at Cameron, at Duke, in the ACC Challenge, where they played well and just came up a little bit short. But I would fully expect them to go to Texas and handle business. Now, the other game I will be interested in, it'll be on at the same time as LSU, so I won't watch any of it, but I am interested to see how it plays out. Vanderbilt is hosting Mississippi State. Man, would I feel better if Vanderbilt won that game by 8 points. Like, Mississippi State's good. They absolutely hammered South Carolina on Saturday. And Chris Jan's a really good coach. They defend like crazy. They're once again very, very physical. And I don't think Vanderbilt's one of the better teams in the league. I think they're one of the lesser teams in the league, which makes Saturday's result in the PMAC even like tougher. But if Vanderbilt can, on its home floor, beat a good Mississippi State team that's 13-1 and ranked 14th in the country, that'll make me feel a little bit better. Now, I could also phrase it as LSU is going to be competing with Vanderbilt at the bottom of the SEC, and I need those teams to take as many losses as they want. But I'm kind of into feeling a little bit better in the first week of January, so maybe I'll just take this one game and take a little bit of a solace in it. I guess what happens for LSU in Missouri will probably indicate more about where LSU is than what Vanderbilt does against Mississippi State, but we'll just have to see. State on the road is a 2.5-point favorite in that game. That'll be an 8 o'clock tip on ESPNU. Incidentally, LSU this evening is an 8 o'clock start on the SEC Network at Missouri. 7.5 still the number between LSU and Missouri. If you're looking for my LSU basketball content, you can always find it wherever you find your podcasts wherever you find your podcasts. It's called Hoops with Hunt. It's the same podcast that I've been doing forever and ever on the same feed. It's just not every day, and it's not in the morning. It's just whenever I do basketball content here on the show. So check out Hoops with Hunt. Resubscribe if you have unsubscribed over the years, and you'll get my LSU basketball content each and every day there at Hoops with Hunt. If you missed any of what we did today on the show in the first hour, you can catch that on demand at 1045ESPN.com's on demand tab, LouisianaSports.net, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, wherever you find your sound, you can always find us. Just search Hunt Palmer Show. Like, subscribe, rate, review. We always appreciate y'all's feedback. Open the show previewing LSU and Missouri this evening from Columbia. Sharief Ishaq was aboard at 1:15 to kind of talk about where the Saints go from here, some of the names that he's heard, and what the timeline he thinks may be in order for the Saints to hire a head coach. And then, of course, we had Glen on to talk a little LSU as well. Hour 2 is locked and loaded. I've got my pick for the New Orleans Saints head coach position coming up at 2:15. LSU's got 6 players headed for the Senior Bowl. I'll tell you who they are and what that may mean for them. When we come back, Drew King, PowerMizzou.com, going to preview LSU and Missouri from the Mizzou side up in Columbia. That's after SportsCenter on the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.